Good morning, everybody. My name is George Cook, and I serve as the Midwest Regional Director of State and Local Public Policy at General Motors. And I have the distinct pleasure of introducing Governor Gretchen Whitmer today for her speech. As a former staffer for the governor, I know firsthand that the governor's leadership uplifts bipartisan values and collaboration to best serve her constituents and the state of Michigan. She is setting up Michigan for decades of growth and success, and is laser focused on continuing to grow Michigan's economy. General Motors shares the governor's dedication to driving jobs, innovation, and excellence in our home state of Michigan. As the second largest employer in the state of Michigan, with the most U.S. employees of any automaker across the country, General Motors is grateful for the governor's partnership and her continued advocacy for policies that support business in Michigan and that give us a competitive edge globally. With no further ado, Governor Gretchen Whitmer. Thank you.
Well, good morning. I'm so happy to be here with all of you. Thank you for joining us this morning, and thank you, George, for that kind introduction. I want to talk a little bit this morning about how we can work together to get things done to grow our economy, protect our national defense, and make a real difference for the people of this country. And obviously my focus is the people of Michigan, but we are a microcosm, so what's good in Michigan is good for the nation. I came to D.C. because I really believe in our ability to bridge political divides and make lasting progress. And yes, I do believe that. Even in my 7th year as governor, in this tumultuous time in this country and around the globe, I still believe that. And I remain guided by the values that I learned growing up in a bipartisan household in the Midwest. Values of decency, respect, and kindness still shape the way that I approach this work, and it helps me make sure I stay focused on what matters so we can get things done. As a former state legislator, I worked with a Republican governor in Michigan to expand Medicaid under the Affordable Care Act. This covers hundreds of thousands of Michiganders. As a governor, I worked with a Republican-led legislature most of my time as governor. I've signed over 1,500 bipartisan bills and enacted 6 balanced budgets into law. Michiganders have an opportunity, and I believe an obligation, to lead by example and show the folks in D.C. how we get things done. Before we dig into some of my proposals today, I need to acknowledge what's going on with regard to tariffs. I know that that is front in mind for all of us. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. These last few days have been really tough for Michigan. 20% of our economy is tied to the auto industry, which depends on a steady flow of goods from our largest and closest trading partners. We're home to the busiest international border crossing in North America. More than 10,000 vehicles carrying parts and materials cross the bridge between Detroit and Windsor every weekday. We're already seeing the impacts of tariffs. Auto companies are stockpiling parts and laying off workers. Suppliers are facing higher costs and delaying expansions. Dealerships are forced to raise prices by up to $15,000 amid slowing sales. And since every single auto job supports 3 others in the community, the impact is being felt by all of us, including small businesses across my state. Economists have pointed out that these tariffs represent the largest tax increase in nearly 60 years, costing families an average of $1,900. And if you're planning on having a cup of coffee, pumping gas, getting your groceries, buying clothes for your kids, or just simply meeting a friend for a drink, every one of those transactions is going to cost more because of tariffs. At the same time, we know that 401ks and IRAs are plunging, which is going to force older Americans to put off retirement. Home prices are going to go up and putting home ownership further out of reach for young people. So it really is a triple whammy: higher costs, fewer jobs, and more uncertainty. And it couldn't come at a worse time. People have been struggling after years of inflation and wages that aren't keeping up. We need government to stay focused on lowering the cost of living, Instead, what we're getting is the opposite. Less money in our pockets, more doubts about future paychecks, critical government services that are getting defunded when they are needed most. I understand the motivation behind the tariffs. And I can tell you, here's where President Trump and I do agree. We do need to make more stuff in America. More cars and chips, more steel and ships. We do need fair trade. No state has lived through the consequences of offshoring and outsourcing more than Michigan. We know that when you lose a factory, it doesn't just mean losing those jobs. Losing people means losing resources. It means fewer police officers and underfunded schools. It means less housing being built and fewer roads fixed. It's a loss of purpose and identity. So while I share the President's goal of bringing good-paying middle-class manufacturing jobs back, it's got to be done right. Reindustrialization could have huge ripple effects, since manufacturing has the highest economic multiplier of any sector. Every dollar spent to make something triggers a chain reaction of material purchases, job growth, and supply chain, and more economic growth. So as I've said before, I'm not against tariffs outright, but it is a blunt tool. You can't just pull out the tariff hammer to swing at every problem without a clear, defined end goal. We cannot underestimate or underappreciate the time and capital it's going to take to actually bring jobs and supply chains back home. So there's not a shortcut here. Strategic reindustrialization must be a bipartisan project that spans multiple presidential administrations. So to get it done, we've got to work with our friends and compete against our adversaries. We need to be strategic about tariffs on the technology we actually want to make in America and on industries where we already have a sizable competitive advantage. Let's carve out autos and energy, both of which are critical to manufacturers and directly impact people's wallets. Finally, to the extent that tariffs are a strategic tool in an economic toolbox, let's use all of the new revenue to reinvest in American businesses and in our workers. Our history has proven that when we build, we succeed. And the opposite is true as well. When we don't build, we fall behind. When we don't build enough housing, we put the American dream out of reach. When we don't build enough schools, we lose our pipeline of talent. When we don't build enough roads or transit, we make it harder for people to get around and for businesses to move their goods. When we don't build enough factories, the engines that power our industrial economy sputter. The Trump administration says they get this, and I know that the Biden administration understood this too. It's why, despite the political division we see on the surface, there has been a real bipartisan effort below deck to bring manufacturing home. Here's an example from Michigan. In October of 2023, my administration invested $40 million to fix Wilder Road in a small town near Saginaw on the shores of Lake Huron. We got it done to help Vantage Plastics. This is a local manufacturer. We're helping them to build a new factory and create 93 good-paying jobs, local jobs. And this is a very purple part of Michigan. Donald Trump won this area 3 times and I carried it twice. A few weeks ago, Vice President Vance visited the finished factory. He spoke there and he said, and I quote, "Making things, building things, working with our hands is America's heritage." I agree with this. And I'm proud that the amount of money being spent to build factories in America has more than tripled over a decade. In Michigan, we've secured dozens of new facilities to build chips, batteries, cars, and energy. Just this year, major companies have announced huge investments in America to build data centers and factories and research facilities. So here's my pitch. Let's keep going. Let's make more ships and planes and semiconductor chips in America. Let's cut red tape and unleash extraordinary potential of American industry. Let's give more hardworking people a fair shot at a decent life. And let's usher in, as President Trump says, a golden age of American manufacturing. So first I want to talk about ships. I will talk about chips, but I'm talking about ships first. American shipbuilding output is a fraction of what it was in the 1950s. We build just 0.1%, all right, 1.1% of the world's ships, while China alone makes 53%. That's more than the rest of the world combined. Here's another shocking stat. China's largest state-owned ship company built more ships by tonnage last year than we have in the last 80 years, since the end of World War II. Shipbuilding is both a commercial and military challenge, but I'm going to focus on the military side. Last September, the United States Navy set an ambitious goal of building hundreds more ships and submarines over the next few decades. If we don't progress toward that goal, China's naval fleet could be 50% larger than ours by 2030. It's not that far away. So I'm encouraged that both parties appear to see the problem. In December, Republicans and Democrats in Congress introduced the Ships for America Act, which would be the most significant bipartisan legislation to build ships in decades. Last month, during his joint address to Congress, President Trump announced that he will establish a new Office of Shipbuilding in the White House under the National Security Council. A few days later, Brett Seidel, the Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Navy for R&D, testified in front of the House Armed Services Committee. He outlined the challenges that we face, including reduced manufacturing capacity, supply disruptions, and most of all, workforce shortages. The last factor, workforce, is huge. We are short more than 100,000 workers, as nearly every major American shipyard has a hard time hiring and retaining the workforce they need. The shortage will get worse in a generation as we see a generation of experienced ship workers start to retire. If we don't act, our shipbuilding workforce will soon be smaller and less experienced than ever. In Michigan, we're the tip of the spear, or the tip of the torpedo in this case, in facing this challenge. Last year, the former Navy Secretary and I launched the Michigan Maritime Manufacturing, or the M3 initiative. It's a job training program built in partnership with Macomb County and Macomb County Community College to prepare thousands of Michiganders for careers in maritime welding and machining. A few weeks ago, I attended the first ever M3 graduation. It was full of inspiring stories. There was a mother and son who are graduating together. A young man who built on his career in tech education he got in high school. Another who went from homelessness to a hopeful future where he signed a contract that day with a company at a good paying job. A clerk, a caregiver, a Coast Guard veteran. These are some of the people that graduated that day. We've already heard from businesses that have hired some of these recent graduates and are really impressed with their technical talent and the skills they brought on day one. A couple of weeks ago, I shared the success of this M3 initiative with Defense Secretary Hegseth. I told him it's good for workers, it's been good for Michigan, and it's good for America too, and national security. So my proposal is let's grow it. Let's expand initiatives like this. Let's do it statewide in Michigan, but replicate it across the country. The state of Michigan is ready to serve as a connector between the Navy and our network of 31 tribal and community colleges. We have the skills and the ability to make sure we're training people up. We can train thousands of Michiganders to do what we do best, which is GSD, get ship done. Now let's talk about planes. We are the world leader in both commercial and military aviation. We're the home to industrial giants and manufacturers up and down the supply chain. We have a strong network of allies and around the globe in this space, including the UK's Midland Aerospace Alliance, who I met with 2 weeks ago. Our air superiority is second to none, but we are facing serious economic headwinds as our adversaries are catching up. Globally, we're short 17,000 jets and planes, and plane travel shows no sign of slowing down, with an all-time high of 5.2 billion passengers last year. Because of the shortage, however, airlines are having to use older planes for longer periods of time, for an average of 14 years. Now, there's a huge opportunity here to meet demand while making a profit and maximizing market share. China understands this. This is their plan, actually. They're rapidly expanding their aviation industry, both military and commercial, and they're gaining momentum fast. They're world leaders in drone manufacturing, and just the second country after the United States to have 2 stealth fighter jets, the J-20 and the J-35. China's largest passenger plane company, Commercial Aircraft Corporation, COMAC, now makes models that are competing with best-selling American-made planes on the market. They are on the verge of challenging Boeing and Airbus as a serious competitor. This should serve as a wake-up call to this country. COMAC, like so many Chinese companies, is funded directly by the Chinese government. This allows them to undercut others on the price while they're plowing billions into R&D. We see the same story playing out in the car market. Over the past decade, Chinese automakers, directly funded by the Chinese government, have muscled their way into countries around the world. They can sell at a loss because of the way that they're funded, and they're gobbling up market share, and they're driving out local competition. In Southeast Asia, Japanese giants like Honda and Toyota and Nissan are selling fewer cars. In Europe, Volkswagen was forced to close a factory for the first time in its century-long history because of Chinese competition. If we don't hit the throttle now, while we lead in the commercial and military aviation, China will pass us. That's something we cannot afford. We must protect our lead, and Michigan is ready and poised to do whatever it takes to win this. We can lean on our manufacturing experience and skilled workforce to boost domestic aviation manufacturing. We've got history here. There is precedent here. During World War II, Michigan automakers and suppliers took to the skies. In a matter of months, we shifted from producing cars and trucks for civilians to producing airplanes, tanks, guns, and shells for GIs. A Buick factory won a contract to build 500 engines a month, but ended up making 2,000 during that time. At Ford's legendary Willow Run Airport, 42,000 Michiganders rolled a B-24 bomber off the line every hour, 24/7, for a grand total of 8,865. And a generation of Rosie the Riveters said, "We can do it," and they worked in the factories. We were able to get it done because the federal government set a clear strategy, made it easier to move fast by slashing red tape, and simplified procurement. When you already know how to make something complicated, like a car, it's a lot easier to shift your factory to make something else. Domestic manufacturers, whether they're multinational corporations or small and mid-sized companies further up the supply chain, stand ready and capable to do this. If we collaborate at the state and federal level, we can make targeted investments to retool our factories, to make planes, plane parts, and drones. We have manufacturing and innovation ecosystem that is uniquely suited for modern defense and aerospace needs. Another contributing factor to slowing aviation industry, just like with shipbuilding, is a shrinking workforce. Nearly a quarter of American aviation technicians have fewer than 5 years of experience, as a huge wave of retirements is about to hit the market. Experts estimate that by 2028, we'll be short 37,000 aviation techs. At the state level, I can tell you Michigan's doing our part. We've made historic bipartisan investments in places like the Selfridge National Air Guard Base, a key defense hub and economic anchor that supports thousands of jobs and hundreds of military families in Macomb County. I established a new statewide Office of Defense and Aerospace Innovation, and in the heart of Detroit, we set up the Transportation Innovation Zone, where aviation and aerospace startups can easily test new technologies in public airspace. But we can't do this alone. We need help from Washington. We need a coordinated national strategy and bipartisan investment to grow America's aviation industry and workforce. Otherwise, we know that China is going to eat our lunch. If we're proactive, we can create tens of thousands of good-paying jobs and protect our national security and lower costs for travelers around the world and here at home. So let's make it easier for aviation and aerospace to thrive in America. Let's put a ruthless emphasis on outcomes over process. And let's build and innovate and own the skies. I started speaking about big manufacturing projects. Now I want to focus on the smallest. I want to talk about semiconductor chips. Chips are the brains behind so much of what makes our lives work. They're in our phones, they're in our cars, they're in our appliances. They're critical for AI technology as well. Decades ago, we invented chips, and we used to make them too. But then we just ceded ground to other nations, especially China. For a long time, we made zero logic and DRAM chips. These are two of the most advanced types that we all rely on. Thankfully, Republicans, Democrats, and industry leaders came together to do something about it. During President Trump's first term, we started a serious national conversation about semiconductor manufacturing. A few years later, during the Biden years, Congress passed bipartisan legislation to bring chip manufacturing back home. I'm grateful to so many of our congressional delegation who fought hard to get it across the finish line. Now, because we work together, we are seeing real progress. An example from Michigan is Hemlock Semiconductor, who expanded in their hometown near Saginaw with a new facility that's going to create more than 1,000 jobs. Hemlock is one of the largest producers of hyper-pure polysilicon. You're never more than a few feet away from Michigan-made polysilicon because it's in nearly every single electronic device in the world. Nationally, we're now on track to make 20% of the world's logic chips and 10% of the DRAM chips, up from zero. We're building 17 chip fab facilities, including one from each of the world's 5 best and biggest manufacturers. Altogether, they've committed to investing more than $600 billion in America. And I know that there are still more in the pipeline. These chip fabs offer thousands of jobs during construction and thousands more permanent, long-term local jobs once they are completed. Both Democrats and Republicans agree that we must stay on the bleeding edge of technology. The President even mentioned chips during his speech to Congress and set up a new United States Investment Accelerator to oversee semiconductor projects. We have the momentum right now, but we cannot risk stepping back or faltering. We need to continue strong bipartisan efforts at the state and national level to make more chips. The bottom line is that when America innovates and when America builds, America wins. We all want manufacturing to be stronger than ever. Nobody wants that more than Michiganders. We pride ourselves on the things we make and grow. As I've laid out, we need a consistent national strategy, united around a new economic consensus that a lot of Democrats and Republicans now share. Let's make stuff in America. If that's what we believe, then we should be able to celebrate good policy no matter where it comes from, and also criticize bad policy wherever it comes from. Now, there's a lot more common ground here than we think. While partisanship seems to have infected every aspect of our lives, and it's exhausting. It's driven by opportunistic politicians and cynical media figures and addictive algorithms. But our people are not as divided as our politics. I really believe that. People from every walk of life call Michigan home. We are a microcosm, and that's why every presidential election, people look to see what's going on in Michigan. We don't always agree, that's for sure. But we move forward together, and that is a source of strength. It's why I came to be came here to D.C. Building on an industrial economy is no small task. It's thousands of small tasks. And each of us, government, industry entrepreneurs, workers, we're all a part of the same pit crew. I'm from Michigan, so yes, I'm going to torture another auto analogy. We're all a part of the same pit crew. If we do our jobs, we can get America back on the track, better and faster than ever. Don't just take my word for it. Talk to someone like Roger Penske. He's a successful businessman who's built a $43 billion company, 74,000 employees, and that company happens to be headquartered in Michigan. In addition to his thriving commercial trucking business, Penske runs the world's leading motorsports enterprise. He knows what it takes to run a good pit crew and build a business that is successful. At the Detroit Grand Prix, the Penske crew runs a full systems check, replaces 4 tires, and pumps 20 gallons of fuel in 6.2 seconds to get their car moving toward the checkered flag as quickly as possible. They work together. They use a data-driven strategy. They source the best products they can to win. That's what we should be doing as well. I know there's been a lot of talk recently about government efficiency, but the proposed solutions have been solely focused on firing people from the crew or stripping away critical parts. That's no way to win a race. If we really want to win and to keep winning, we need to reinvest in our crew and build better parts. In our darkest hours, that's exactly what we did. When this country entered World War II, we didn't have the industrial capacity to fight a 2-front war in Europe and in the Pacific, let alone win it. So we built the arsenal of democracy. It was the most successful collaboration between government and industry and workers in our history. When the Allies won the war, 500,000 Michiganders flooded into downtown Detroit to celebrate, realizing the part they all played in saving the world. Now, fast forward to just a few years ago. As we faced a deadly global pandemic, the President launched Operation Warp Speed. We moved faster than anyone thought was possible to create, test, make, and ship billions of shots of a life-saving vaccine. I still remember the pride I felt when I watched the Pfizer vaccine get packed into trucks and roll out of Portage, Michigan. People stood outside on the road, even though it was bitter cold, waving the stars and stripes, proud of what we had done. It was an extraordinary achievement that showed us what's possible when we work together to streamline government and allow America to do what it does best, innovate and build. We got a lot going for us, but our future is uncertain. We have good cards, but good cards alone don't mean jack if you don't play them right. This year and in the years to come, no matter who is in the White House, we need to be betting on American workers. We need to bring chip manufacturers back home. So let's dominate the seas and the skies and the roads. And let's innovate and let's build together. I really appreciate you joining me this morning, and I'm looking forward to the conversation that we're about to have next. Thank you so much.
Governor, thank you for those comments. It makes me proud to be a Michigander, proud to be an American. Thank you so much. It's a privilege to be here today to introduce Governor Gretchen Whitmer for her fireside chat with Gretchen Carlson. As a guy named George, I very rarely share a room with another George, let alone a stage, so it's good to make the distinction. Gretchen Carlson is an acclaimed journalist and co-founder of the nonprofit Lift Our Voices, which seeks to change workplace cultures and empower every worker to feel safe, respected, and included. Gretchen is a fearless advocate for women's rights and helped pave the way for the global #MeToo movement. She is a former CBS News and Fox News journalist, best-selling author, TED Talk alum, and champion for workplace equality. Gretchen brought together Democrats and Republicans to pass 2 important bipartisan laws: the Ending Forced Arbitration of Sexual Assault and Sexual Harassment Act in March of 2022, and the Speak Out Act in December of that same year, 2 of the biggest labor law changes in the last 100 years. Gretchen has shown what it means to work across the aisle to get results. And as Governor Whitmer pointed out earlier, with signing almost 1,500 bipartisan bills into law, she does as well. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today. I will now turn it over to the Governor and Gretchen Carlson, and I look forward to their conversation.
Thank you. Well, thanks so much for being here today. It's my honor to be up on the stage as well. We're going to tackle tariffs, and we're going to talk about the governor's bipartisan approach. But first things first, our name.
Yeah.
So when I was growing up in a small town in Minnesota, everyone was Jennifer or Elizabeth, and quite honestly, I didn't really like my name, Gretchen. When it came to running for student council in 7th grade, there was nothing that rhymed with Gretchen. My dad came up finally with Stretchin' for Gretchen for your vote. Last week at Starbucks, my name was Wretch. So my question for you this morning is, my Gen X Gretchen friend, did you like your name growing up? Do you like it now?
You know what? I was the only Gretchen growing up, just like you, Jennifer's, et cetera. And I wasn't particularly enamored with it, to be honest, but I'm named after my grandma Gretchen, who I adore. It's funny, though, because she always said, never let anyone shorten your name. Don't let people call you Gretch because it rhymes with wretch. And so I always had this aversion to being called Gretch. And then during the pandemic, I got the nickname Big Gretch. I don't know many women that want big on the front of their nickname. And then Gretch, I wasn't sure, but when I found out it was bestowed on me from support, became my new favorite nickname. I'm not encouraging you to adopt that, but it's worked for me. But yeah, now I like it because it's kind of nice to have a different name.
I was envious of you because you did have a cool nickname, Big Gretch, and your book, True Gretch. So you have two of them. So in your speech, you reminded us that 20% of Michigan's economy is tied to the auto industry. And of course, you're home to the biggest international border crossing in America. Today, the hatchet came down with Trump's tariffs. And quite honestly, they're going to hit your state harder than most. You mentioned that Trump's using a hatchet or a blunt tool. How would you have enacted the Trump tariffs differently?
You know, I don't know how I would have enacted them differently. I haven't really thought about that. What I have thought about, though, is, you know, tariffs need to be used like a scalpel, not a hammer. There is a purpose to have tariffs, but the uncertainty that has now been created, the anxiety and the fear, just breeds destruction, I think, in our economy, in our personal economies, but certainly in, you know, the auto market in particular. You know, the president negotiated USMCA. It was a good deal. It has worked, and I think, you know, now treating our allies, our North American neighbors, like adversaries is going to cost all of us. It's not just going to cost that relationship, but every American consumer. It's probably going to cost a lot of auto jobs, make the cost of buying an auto, much less blueberries from Mexico, going up. And so the big loser in this is American manufacturing. It is the American consumer. Understand that China, yes, we need to have our eye on China. I talked about it, whether it's in aerospace and ship making and in automotive and in a variety of economic ways. That is different. We need to level the playing field. We need to enforce the laws against Chinese companies that are coming into this country, underwritten by the Chinese government. But the North American tariffs in particular are really going to have a dramatic negative impact on Michiganders and on business. Business wants certainty. And right now, when the rules are changing literally day by day, no company is going to be able to invest the hundreds of millions or billions of dollars in many cases, much less make decades-long investments because you don't know what the rules are. And because of that, we're going to see contraction, we're going to see paralysis, and it is going to lead to job losses and higher costs for people. And so I will continue to encourage the White House to think about what the long-term strategy is. How do we meet those goals, and to recognize this isn't a moment-to-moment issue. It's just going to continue to wreak havoc and make everyone feel the anxiety and fear and have dramatic losses that we can't afford to have right now.
I want to talk about your constituents because I don't have to tell you that Michigan has had it tough with trade wars. NAFTA eviscerated manufacturing when production moved to other countries and to cheaper southern states. And now tariffs are quite honestly putting you in a tough spot with your constituents. On the one hand, you have the UAW, who for the most part is in favor of these tariffs, saying that, you know, if they work as Trump says they will work, then it'll bring back jobs and manufacturing. But on the other side, you have the auto manufacturers and you have the auto dealers who are going to get killed with these additional tariffs. So how do you thread the needle for all of your constituents?
Well, you know, as I talked, Michigan does feel, you know, there's a saying that when America gets a cold, Michigan gets the flu, right? We are the first to be hit when, to feel the pain of decisions that could be argued to be capricious or not strategic. We feel it harder than any other state, and that's what we're seeing already in Michigan. You know, I understand the sentiment that some are conveying, yes, we should be onshoring supply chains. I agree with that. Yes, we should be building more stuff in America, 100%. It's a national security issue on top of all the other reasons that it's a good thing for jobs. It is a good thing for consumers. And if we had a magic wand, could we all go back and redo some things differently? That'd be lovely, but we don't. The reality is, in this moment, we have supply chains that have been built up with our North American neighbors that American jobs rely on, seamless flow. Yes, perhaps we should be onshoring, and the goal is great, but we need to be realistic. That doesn't happen overnight. There are suppliers that are still trying to recover from inflation and COVID who are on the bubble and don't have the resources to weather this up and down uncertain time that, you know, where the rules keep changing. And so I do worry that a lot of businesses won't make it if this goes on much longer. I worry that big companies that are relying on those small businesses then pay a price as well. You know, I have done a little bit of traveling abroad recently, and I can tell you there is an anti-American sentiment that they're saying don't buy American goods anymore. American companies are going to pay a price for that. And so I'm really very concerned about how do we navigate this. As for the UAW, we'll lose some UAW jobs. And I understand the leader wants to try to be a part of the conversation, and you know, he's a good guy. He's done some good things, but I think that the longer term concern is the loss of UAW jobs and the pain that's going to be inflicted in the short term.
Well, speaking of that, immediately after the Trump tariffs were announced, 900 UAW workers were laid off. A University of Michigan economist says the steel and aluminum tariffs alone will cost Michigan 600 auto manufacturing jobs by the end of next year, an additional 1,700 jobs in industries that serve auto workers. So, to your point, are the tariffs really good for auto workers?
I would argue they're not. I would argue that all of this uncertainty is going to cost every one of us, but especially auto workers. So, and I think we're already seeing that, the immediate impact. The longer term, it could be a lot worse.
So some experts are also arguing that manufacturing in 2025 and beyond isn't like the 60s or the 70s. Jobs have been modernized, obviously, with technology and AI, and that those will actually be the new jobs that are coming, if any. So you talk a lot about the hope of future manufacturing jobs. Is that really real, not to mention that they take time to come to fruition?
Yes, it is. You know, as I talk to economists, there's no question that the type of manufacturing is very different. It's a lot cleaner. It's a lot more automated. You still need a lot of people. You need people to run the machines. You need people with a higher, different, you know, set of skills in order to do this. And as we look at shipbuilding and aerospace, you know, as I was talking about earlier, there is a huge amount of need. There's a real opportunity for us in manufacturing, good paying jobs, but it requires discipline. It requires marshaling the resources, streamlining the processes, and making sure we've got the workforce to do those jobs. And so, as I highlighted M3, which is a great initiative that we have in partnership with the U.S. Navy. You know, it's going to take thousands of small investments like that in order for us to meet the need, but there's a real opportunity here. If we seize on this, in 10 years, our manufacturing capabilities will be even more advanced. We'll have more people making more money, but also we will be owning these industries instead of trying to catch up or having our adversary be the dominant leader in all of these realms.
So last week, Trump demanded that automakers not pass along the increase in costs to consumers. Ironically, my family was in the car business in Minnesota for 100 years, so I've lived this and seen the ups and downs. Dealers honestly don't make money selling cars. I mean, they make it in service and body work and used car sales, and so the margins are small for new cars. There's no way they can absorb these kinds of tariff costs. So where are these higher costs going to be passed down to? The consumer? To the dealer? Who?
Yeah, well, the dealer won't be in business very long if they assume all the costs. So it will, by necessity, be passed on to the consumer. This is a tax on the American people. And, you know, I know that tariff is a term of art, but the reality of what it means for the American consumer is it's just like a tax. And unfortunately, it's unclear how this is going to strategically benefit the American economy or the American consumer. And I think that's the big problem here. The uncertainty as well. You know, people are watching what's happening in their personal lives. Businesses are watching what's going on with the market. It is a direct reaction to the continued change in what policy is, whether or not it's negotiable. And then some days it is negotiable. Some days it's this percentage or it's this percentage. I mean, this will have a paralyzing impact on the economy. And if you think that a company or a country is paying the tariff, you're being misled. It is the consumer that ends up paying the cost, and it's a tax.
And that leads us to what happens to the economy. JP Morgan and others are now predicting 50 to 60% possibility of a recession. The 2008 recession hit the auto industry hard in Michigan in general. Are you afraid history is going to repeat itself?
I am. It won't be a real repetition because that was driven by other things than some decisions by the White House, but the impact could be as severe, if it could be worse, frankly. And that is, I think, a real potential outcome of if this goes on a lot longer. I'm hopeful that the administration is taking in the feedback and understands the onshoring will take time. It doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen over weeks. This is a years-long process. And so we've got to help American manufacturers. We've got to help American businesses weather this, and we've got to make sure that the consumers don't bear the brunt of it. If there is a strategy that can be communicated, markets will settle down and businesses can deploy those resources and make those long-term commitments. But so long as it is a roller coaster, no one's going to do anything because they're going to wait to see what happens, and we're all going to pay the price for that.
Speaking of strategy, one of your other big messages today and before has been your focus on bipartisanship and trying to work across the aisle. At my nonprofit, Lift Our Voices, as George mentioned, we believe in that philosophy too. In 2002, we were instrumental in passing those 2 bipartisan laws. I'm not going to say it was easy, but we ended up accomplishing that. So while that marked a huge bipartisan win, quite honestly, many people remain very skeptical that we can actually come together during this hyper-political divided time that we live in. Why do you think that preaching bipartisanship is the right approach?
Well, I know that we're never going to find common ground if we're not talking to each other. And I also understand, in this moment, it feels like no action comes without loud criticism from one realm or another. And as someone in the public eye, I can tell you it's coming from both sides of the political spectrum. I met with some of my friends in the Michigan legislature, and someone was talking about how difficult it is to find, common ground and to get everyone on the same page. And I said, all right, stop trying to do that because you'll never be successful. I could, demonstrate on the front lawn of the Capitol for 4 weeks on end, and some people would say I hadn't gone far enough. Just accept the fact that there's always going to be the critic. But we have a duty, an oath, to try to get things done, to put the welfare of the people of Michigan before our own interests, before our political interests, and to stay at the table or to find common ground in something, to do the good work. And I'm sure you've seen, I'd love to know kind of what any lessons you've gleaned from your experience. But when I get out and I talk to Michiganders, they rarely ask me about politics. They're concerned about whether or not they can put food on the table. They're concerned about whether their child is getting the education and meeting being able to have the skills they need to be successful in this life. When I ran for governor, I got into all 83 counties. I've done that a couple of times since being governor. And I try to listen to Michiganders. I try to ask, what's going on in your life? What can I do that'll make your life better? If there was one thing I could do. And it frequently comes back to the economics of trying to get ahead. That's what unites all of us. And that's why I wanted to focus on manufacturing and our economic future, because I really do believe we can find common ground there. I was able to do it with a Republican legislature in Michigan at a time where they controlled both chambers, and Donald Trump was president at the beginning of my term. We got some great, big, important things done for Michigan because I come to the table with that philosophy. And being raised in a household, my dad was a Republican, my mom a Democrat. I know that if you talk about values, it's a lot easier to see one another and to try to find that common ground. When you were able to get those important pieces of legislation done, and I think working with Congress would be so much harder than a state legislature. Anything that was surprising to you or was most important in your success on that?
Being relentless.
Yeah.
But I also feel like there was a commonality of some of the issues, right? I mean, with regard to sexual misconduct, especially, like when I would go into whether it was a Republican or Democratic office, they could hardly wait to tell me stories about what their wife had endured or their daughter if they were men. So there was that common ground that you're talking about. Now, getting across the finish line is a whole different story. We'll chat.
Yeah.
But anyway, I do want to focus in on how Democrats feel about this, because a recent CBS YouGov poll revealed that 70% of all Democrats want their party to oppose Trump as much as possible, while only 30% want their party to find common ground. So what do you say to those 70% in your party who completely disagree with you about bipartisanship?
I get it. I understand why people feel that way. I am as anxious and angry about a lot of the policies that are coming out of Washington, D.C. right now. I feel that too. And I also recognize I got a big job, and that is to run the state of Michigan, a state of 10 million people, many of whom disagree with me about everything that I do, some of whom agree with me about a lot that I do. No one agrees with everything. And I accept that. But I took an oath to the people of Michigan to try to get as much done for the state. Now, people come for our rights. I'm going to be the first one out there. People come for your health care. I'm out there doing work with Congresswoman Debbie Dingell to talk about what Medicaid cuts could mean to individuals, to health systems, to all of our ability to access health care. I'll continue to do that work. I will hold people accountable. I also got to continue to make sure I got a seat at the table so I can try to get important things done. For instance, today, I've got the Republican Speaker of the Michigan House joining me here in Washington, D.C. We're going to have some meetings with cabinet members and at the White House to talk about protecting the Great Lakes. I don't know if he knows that that's one of the things I want to talk about, but I'm going to. To talk about, making sure that we are growing our economy and landing good paying jobs. We've got some opportunities in the works. We could use some help. I want to talk about that. I'm going to talk about the impact of tariffs. I don't know that I'll make any ground, but I'm not going to cede the opportunity to talk about something that is important to my state. And I think it was Pat Schroeder. I know the quote's been attributed to a lot of different people, but I think it was Pat Schroeder who said it. If you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And my oath to the people of Michigan is to continue to show up, even when it means I'm going to get my lunch handed to me. I'm going to keep showing up and keep fighting for the people of Michigan, no matter who is at the other side of the table. That's my job, and I'm going to do it until my last day as governor.
So speaking of messaging, obviously after this last election, Democrats were sort of flummoxed by what the messaging should be. And quite honestly, the party's struggling with what the messaging should be to voters. Your focus in your speeches has been on costs and jobs and roads. Besides being bipartisan, is that the right messaging for Democrats?
Well, I think that everyone needs to listen, not to me, to the people. I know that I've learned so much by just showing up and asking the question, what's going on in your life? What do you need? What are you worried about? That's what public servants should be doing. Not telling people what to be angry about, but listening and focusing on solving the problems that are vexing the people of this country. In my case, the people of Michigan. I'm not going to tell another governor how to run their state. I'm not going to tell anyone else, how they should talk about issues, but they should stay focused on the things that matter to the people. And the economy is front and center. For anyone to think that if you're worried about putting food on the table or keeping the lights on at your home, that you've got the bandwidth to care about a million other things, maybe they care, but all their energy is consumed by survival. And so fixing the roads is not just about making a smoother drive for everybody. It's about helping people keep more money in their pockets so they're not shelling out thousands to fix the rim on their car when they got to pay the rent and child care. It is about the fundamentals, and I think that's maybe why I got elected in the first place and why I got reelected by such a large margin. I'm staying focused on how we can help Michiganders get ahead, keep more money in their pockets, and have good paying jobs.
So whether the message from Dems is being bipartisan or changing their mind about transgenders in sports or talking about jobs and infrastructure, who's going to get it right? Who is the leader of the Democrat Party right now?
Well, the Democratic Party only has one true leader when we have the White House. When we're not, when we don't have the president, there's a lot of leaders in the Democratic Party. I think I'm really fortunate to have such a great bench of fellow governors that I call my good friends that, have been really important in terms of helping us navigate historic challenges from pandemics to the current situation that we are in, to leaders in Congress who play a really important role in terms of what's going on here in Washington, D.C. So I would say there's very rarely one true leader of the Democratic Party, and probably the same true on the other side of the aisle, although maybe not in this moment. But, at the end of the day, we've got to make sure that we stay focused on the things that matter to the American people. If we are sidetracked by issues that aren't salient to the average person, I don't see how we have a different outcome than what we are experiencing now. And that's why I want to encourage people talking about the economy, talking about good paying jobs, American manufacturing, solving people's problems. That's the most powerful way that we can improve the lives of people in this country, and I think that's what we need to remember.
So at Lift Our Voices, we know how important it is to support all workers. Are you saying then that your plan is going to get back the working class who went to Trump last time? Your plan's going to get back independents who decide every election and went to Trump last time?
It's not my plan. This is a lesson from our history. This is an assessment of our reality that we are in right now, and where do we want to be? I think that that's the kind of analysis every one of us should be doing. We want leaders who are not just focusing on keeping us angry with one another, but where do we get to where we want to be? That's what I'm talking about here. This is about an honest assessment of our challenges, but also an optimistic view of what's possible, where we can find a future where every person can get ahead and be a part of building a country that is a world leader. I would say we got a lot of work to do, and that's what I'm focused on. A government that is strategic, that is focused on strength and opportunity for every American worker, where there is a fair shot at a great life, but also an America that leads the world again on all these fronts.
So you're more than 500 miles away from home giving this big speech. You could have given it in Lansing, but instead you chose to do it in the nation's capital. Is this your way of telling us you are seriously considering coming to D.C., perhaps to the 1600 block of Pennsylvania Avenue? Are you running for president?
No, this is my way of saying, this is similar to speeches that I've given in Michigan too, by the way. This is, I think, a blueprint for success. This is what we did in Michigan during World War II. This is what we are capable of as a nation. We need leadership that stays focused on doing these things so that Americans can get to work doing the big manufacturing that we are falling behind on globally, so that we can harness the strength of American companies, American institutions of education, and the American workforce. That's what this is all about. I desperately want whomever is here in the White House today or in the future to really be thinking long-term about how do we build a country that is leaders, that is revered again, that is dominant in these industries, and that has a lifestyle that is the envy of the world. That's who we were at one point. We can be that again. But I think this is what the blueprint should be.
Well, when you do decide to run for president, I hope you tell this Gretch first. Okay?
You got it.
All right. So big Gretch, true Gretch, Governor Gretchen Whitmer, thank you so much for this.
Thank you, Gretchen. I appreciate it.